numbers of you who have come out this afternoon. Have you been promised extra credit? Sometime in 1943, and in early 1944, I was advised to report to Shepherd Field, Wichita Falls, for Air Force training. I went through the routine training program for the Army Air Corps, later the United States Air Force, and had what, in my opinion, I've said many times, was the finest training that a military officer or pilot could possibly have. I think it was so good that many lives were saved as a result. I finished the training program and was assigned to the 91st Bomb Group in England in December 1944. The 91st Bomb Group was the second bomb group to reach England at the very beginning of World War II. It was the base that Clark Gable flew out of, and subsequently Jimmy Stewart, who was there just as I arrived, and left shortly after I arrived. The 91st Bomb Group was referred to by many as the country club of the 8th Air Force. It was the base of the RAF, brick buildings, and all sorts of accoutrements. And so we probably deserve that right, because most of the other bases and the men who were stationed there stayed in what was called Quincy huts, out of fabricated thing. Maybe you know I'll see that. I began flying missions in late December, as Layden mentioned. We were shot down on our 10th mission. Well, not exactly shot down. The mission was to Prague, Czechoslovakia, which was a long, long mission for B-17. B-17 nearly had a range of about 1,200 miles. And to go and to return, Prague, Czechoslovakia was a long, demanding mission. We were struck in the target, lost 2 engines over the target, and had a second engine damaged, which we learned later. As we turned off the target, loss of 2 engines, we began to drop down from the squadron, from the group. The B-17 would fly with 2 engines, but it wouldn't fly very well, and it wouldn't maintain speed and altitude. But it would keep it in the air with 2 engines. We were separated from the squadron, from the group. It was nerve-wracking because as a lone B-17, we were sitting up for the Luftwaffe, German fighter aircraft. As we came across to Germany, the 3rd engine began to cough. I told the crew, I said, we probably need to prepare to bail out. Well, one young fellow on the crew, Paul Gunner, got on the radio and he said, Lieutenant, I cannot do it. He said, you all go ahead and jump. He said, I'm going to ride it out. Of course, no one would accede to that. So we all agreed to stay with the aircraft. And we went across Germany. And by the time we got to the front lines, we were about 800 feet altitude. so low that we could see the flash of the muskets and so forth. They were shooting at us from the front lines. We got across about a mile and a half across the front lines and brought the plane in, wheels up, near the little town of Quincy, Belgium. It's just south of Brussels, Belgium. And brought it in, wheels up, and fortunately, no one was injured. I estimated contusions of the chest from hugging the control column as we landed, but nothing serious at all. We got out of the plane as quickly as we could. There was always a great danger of fire and explosion in a situation like that. We were picked up by our people pretty quickly. Stayed in Belgium about a week and flown back to our base and out in the hospital for about 3 weeks. The mission was, I think, from all reports, a tremendous success. We received advantage reports after these missions. We had briefings, that sort of thing. I subsequently returned to duty and flew the last 3 missions of the war. And then, after the war was over, Layden teases me about that. I think of the war being over in May of 1945. Now, he was in the Pacific, and he takes umbrage about that. He said,
August 45.
1945. He said, it wasn't over. It wasn't over. August 1945.
Mr. Drake, can I jump in and ask some questions?
Please do, yes.
I'll ask some questions, and then if y'all want to ask some questions, then we'll go to Mr. Adams, and then we'll sort of open it up a little more. Well, let's see. You said, well, I want to talk, well, I think when we open it up, we'll go back before the war a little bit and talk. I'm interested in where you were on December 7th, 41, what you remember about that. Of course, that's the day Pearl Harbor is bombed. But I want to ask you some questions. You said you arrived in England in late December 44, or you began to fly your missions in late 44.
I think I flew the first missions in late December 44 and arrived there on the base in late December 44.
Were you aware, were you hearing that December 44 is the time of the Battle of the Bulge, and just for students who don't know, the Battle of the Bulge was Germany's last great offensive in northwestern Europe against the Americans and the other allies. And so this is the month when sort of the game is in the balance. Will the American offensive hold, or will the Germans be able to get the Allies back out and regain territory and strength? Were you aware of, when you arrived in England, was there a lot of talk about what was going on in the battle and the possibility that the Germans might get this thing back?
We were certainly aware of the Belgian Bulge. That was a matter of tremendous importance to all of us and to the Allied forces, of course. So, yes, we were certainly aware of it.
Were you aware, did you hear things about the high casualty rate? I mean, that the Allies were suffering major heavy casualties?
I don't recall now that whether or not I was aware of that or sensitive to it at the time. I don't know.
And then you mentioned your target in this one mission. This was your 13th mission?
The 10th mission.
Your 10th mission.
Yes.
And your target was in
Prague.
What was the particular target you were at?
I believe we were targeting manufacturing plants that manufactured armament for use by the German Reich. Those forces.
And the flight in would be 5.5, 6 hours to the target?
Yes, about that.
And how many times in the course of that flight, because a lot of that flight, I'm looking at the map here, from England over to Prague, a lot of that's over enemy territory. How many times, say on a flight like that, would the plane go through flak?
Nearly always encountered flak as we crossed the English Channel and into the coast. The Germans had anti-aircraft batteries stationed, all of them down there. And then after that, our flight pattern would pretty much avoid exposure to anti-aircraft fire until we got to the target. And once we got to the target area, of course, the anti-aircraft, the Americans controlled the air, and the only German fighters I saw were in the distance. On two occasions, German fighters came through the squadron of the group, and but didn't cause any damage. I was not aware of being harassed by German fighters as Quincy and others were. So they were active, but not as active as the Americans.
Anybody want to ask a question before I've got a few more? Then we can go to Mr. Jones.
What was the name of your B-17?
The name of your B-17?
Well, the one I was flying on this day was named Jezebel. Now that was not my regular plane. The plane that we normally flew, had been pretty badly damaged a week or two earlier on mission to Berlin. So I was assigned to Jezebel on February 14th. And so once in a while, when I tell this story, which really not very often, but once in a while it comes up, and when I mention the name Jezebel, my wife always stiffens a little bit and insists that I explain why I was flying a plane called Jezebel. Anyway, did I answer your question?
Here's another question.
What was the experience that you had 2 years ago?
Pardon?
The experience that you were going to mention that you had 2 years ago?
An
You and your wife?
Experience that you had 2 years ago. That you
Oh. My wife and I planned a trip to France in the fall prior to 2002. And that fall, I got a letter from a man in Brussels who said, I have pictures of your aircraft where it crashed near Quincy, 88. Well, my spine had just tingled. I was so amazed, and he said, I'll send them to him. Well, I said, we're going to be in Europe, and we're coming back to Brussels, and I'd love to meet you. And so we planned to do that, and it turned out we did meet him. We came to the hotel in Brussels, and then he said, I'll take you to the place where your aircraft was shot down. And this was a very emotional experience. So we drove a ways, and then I went into a parking lot, and there were a lot of people with notebooks and cameras and everything, and I walked into a press conference. And so anyway, they asked a lot of questions about it and so forth. So then we did, I've got to apologize. What is the rest of your question? My mind wanders with it. But anyway, that's
Did you want to answer?
He hadn't said what his injury was, I don't think, when he crashed. But the wheel hit him in the chest, and his lung collapsed. And I'm of the opinion he deserves the Purple Heart, but somehow in the records it never got entered. And I'd like to go back, not posthumously, but belatedly, to see if he couldn't find that he was awarded the Purple Heart. Now, there's another thing that pilots from World War II were not aware that their flying would deafen them. Because when they were released, they could hear normally. But as years go by, most pilots that I know from World War II lose their hearing as they get older. Ed has lost part of his hearing, so if you ask questions, ask him a little bit louder so he can hear them.
Or let Layden ask him again and translate or something.
Okay.
Let me ask one more question just to fill something in, and then we can go to Mr. Adams. You said that your plane landed wheels up. Just could you explain briefly what you mean by that?
Well, of course, on an aircraft, you have the benefit of a runway and the benefit of landing on a runway with the wheels down. But the wheels up, like the flat landing and the...
Now, was that because the wheels wouldn't come down, or?
Oh, no, they wouldn't come down, but to try to bring down a plane with the wheels down on rough terrain would almost assure you of a flip-flop and a crash. So the safest thing to do was to go in wheels up. At least that was what we learned in the training portion of our...
And just for the benefit of students who may not know, what's a B-17 for anyway? What's the purpose?
The B stands for bomber. Now I say that because so many people think that B stands for Boeing. And a lot of people refer to it as the Boeing B-17, but that's not what the B is for. It stands for bomber. And it was the 17th form of that particular. They flew B-24s, yeah.
How much tonnage could a B-17 carry? How many bombs could it carry, or what would be the...
My recollection is about 5,000 pounds. You have a... Yeah, I think it carried much the same as B-24. I think about 5,000.
And you were a pilot?
Yes.
Mr. Adams, do you just want to sort of give an overview, and then we can just do the same process?
Good. I was a bombardier on a B-24 in the 15th Air Force, and we flew out of southern Italy. And on the map up here, you look at the spur on the heel of Italy, there's an ancient city called Cerignola that was about 10 miles inland from the Adriatic, and that was where we were based. And our targets were primarily Germany and Austria and northern Italy, sometimes over to Romania. But I spent my time, we were all the age that most of you are here right now, 18, 19, and 20 years of age. We had one old man on our crew, and he was 24, and we called him the old man, because the rest of us were kids. It's been well established by World War II historians that World War II was a man's war fought by boys. And so we boys, like Ed and Layden and myself, we went from 18 and 19 to 35 in about 2 months. Because it didn't take long. I started flying my missions in the 15th in early December of 1944 and continued on until the end of the war. The B-24 was the other bomber during World War II used in Europe in addition to the 17, and we B-24 guys, like the kid guys like Ed, said we could fly farther, higher, and faster than you could, you know. But the B-17 was considered to be a much more stable platform and everything. War is certainly no fun, and I've told my children and grandchildren that, and say, well, Dad, Granddad, tell us about the war. And I'd say, well, I wouldn't give a nickel to do it again, but I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience. And so our missions usually averaged about 8 hours round trip. When we'd take off, assemble over the Adriatic, fly north, drop our bombs, and come back. We went to Vienna 7 times, and to Linz, Austria, about 5, and to Graz, about 3, plus other miscellaneous targets, and so forth. So when I got to my outfit, we were short on bombardiers, and so I'd fly one day with my crew, and the next day with another crew who didn't have a bombardier, and back and forth. So I got in a lot more missions than my crew did because of that reason. I think it would be, I was thinking coming up here, what if I were in your position, an undergraduate at a very fine university like John Brown, what you'd want to hear some guys 80 years old talk about things that happened 60 years ago. And it goes without saying, I can remember things very vividly of what happened 60 years ago, better than I can what I had for breakfast this morning. So I can remember those incidents, and Layden and I have been friends for many, many years, and he asked me one time, said, "Do you ever think about the war?" And I said, "I think about it every day, every day." And as crews, we lived in tents in Italy, and it was always either muddy or dusty. The weather was terrible, food was sorry, but the Germans were worse. You know, I'm sure you all have seen these PGA golf advertisements on the radio, and some professional golfer will perform some phenomenal feat with a golf ball, and then this voiceover would say, "Boy, these guys are good," you know. Well, I'd say this, that the German fighter pilots and the guys that manned their anti-aircraft batteries, they were good. They were all kids just like we were, just like you are. I had formed no personal animosity toward them myself, because they were just doing a job for their country. They were young, some of them much younger than we were, because there are many instances of anti-aircraft pilots being 14 and 15 years of age. And the Luftwaffe pilots that flew the Focke-Wulfs and the Messerschmitts, they were plenty good, plenty good. And anytime I've flown a lot of missions when the flak would just be, we used to say, it was so thick you could get out and walk on it, because the German anti-aircraft batteries would throw up flak to form just a steel box that you had to fly through. And on bombing missions, you would line up at your initial point on a straight and level track toward the target. And you flew the same altitude, the same speed, and the same heading for a considerable period of time in order to get there. And that's when you were the very most vulnerable, because the anti-aircraft batteries could set up on top of you. And as soon as the fighters left us, then we knew that the flak was ready to start coming up. But I've flown a lot of missions when we get shot up pretty badly by flak, and we'd all get back home, even though pretty badly damaged. But I have never flown a mission when the fighters hit us that we all got back, because they were good, and they were putting up a last desperate stand in Austria and southern Germany and Italy when we were there. I think some of the interesting points might be just the kind of the routine. If you were flying a mission, it would be posted the evening before, so you went home in order to go to sleep as quickly as you could. And then they would come by and wake you up about 3:30 in the morning, and before we'd have our briefing. And everybody would assemble in the briefing room, and the intelligence officer would pull back a screen, much as this is, and the diagram of the mission would be on that screen. Now, if you had just gotten shot to pieces the day before at a given target, like Bodertal, Germany, and you close the screen back, and you're going back to the same place today that you went to yesterday when it was so bad, the groans would just go up all over the room. But it was, I say this, and I know that Ed agrees with me, because we were visiting previously, that we were all volunteers. We were trained to do what we did, and we wanted to do it. There was never any griping about bad food or bad weather or anything like that, because we were determined to do our job and do it to the very best of our ability. And the patriotic fervor during World War II was very, very evident. And I'm sure that some of you have grandfathers perhaps who were in World War II, and you talked with them about it in various branches of the service. But the atmosphere in America was very patriotic. Everybody wanted to win the war, and it was very supportive. So that kind of gives you a background. There were many, many incidents of various kinds, and I fortunately did never have to crash land like Ed did, but we've lost engines. We limped back into a British fighter base just over our lines, and we had 2 engines, and then as we were landing, we lost the 3rd engine. And as soon as we were able to finally stop the plane because of no hydraulic system and eased off the runway, this British ambulance, Army ambulance with all the sirens going and the red lights flashing, zoomed out to the plane, wheeled around, backed up, ran around, opened up the back doors, and we said, hey, we're fortunate. Nobody was hurt. Nobody's wounded. And he said, well, friend, we just brought you some hot tea. This British soldier stepped out with a 5-gallon milk can filled with full of hot tea, already creamed in sugar, and it tasted good.
Layden has a, or Mr. Stroud has a question.
You ever see any German jet aircraft?
Absolutely. The ME-262 was their jet fighter, which was just coming on board toward the end of the war. Had they had that fighter much earlier, the war might still be going on, because it was dramatic. And when we got back from our mission, we always had a debriefing, and the intelligence officer said, well, how'd the mission go? Anything take place? And we said, yes. Saw a German jet fighter today who came through the formation. He said, no, you didn't see it. There are none. They don't have any, They just don't have any. We did not have the intelligence at that point to know that they had an operative jet fighter at that point. And then another incident, flew a mission on Christmas Day, 1944. And of course, flak is always black puffs everywhere, except to show you that the Germans did have a sense of humor. On Christmas Day, 1944, they set up red and green flags.
Wow.
Tell them that you got some distinguished flying crew.
Well, you almost take to think about this, because we all know that the heroes didn't come back, but everybody did what they did. You would have done the same thing that any of us did if you were in the same position at the same time. But on one mission, we were shot up pretty badly, and the navigator in the B-24 sits right up on top of the bombardier. And incidentally, the Norden bomb site was a magnificent piece of equipment. And it was just an enormous breakthrough. It enabled us literally at 25 and 30,000 feet to drop a bomb. If you got the wind right, your crosshairs were zeroed in and everything, you could drop a bomb very accurately from that height. To the degree of within 100 yards. And so in marshalling yards, railroad collections, ball bearing factories, refineries, and so forth, we could do a terrific job. But on the bomb run, I had my eye on the bomb site, and the navigator kicked me in the back, and which you just don't do because it takes all your attention on the bomb site. And I hurriedly looked around to see what the difficulty was, and I thought his head had been blown off because it was nothing but blood. Well, we were on a low-level mission that day, and a 20-millimeter nose cone had just come through the side of the plane, and it hit him in the forehead. Fortunately, at that altitude, most of its strength had been diminished at that point, and so he got a serious wound, but not to the degree that it could have been if we'd been 1,000 feet lower. And so I couldn't do anything other than continue on the bomb run until we dropped our bombs, closed the bomb bay door, and then I took care of him with the things that we had available to us, and the pilot's controls were shot out, and we kind of tried to fix those up, and a few things like that. And so some people thought that I deserved doing something, but I didn't anyway.
You've sort of described what a bombardier does, but what could you just sort of restate that? What exactly was your job on this? What is 4 hours out, 4 hours back, and what are you doing during that time?
I was hoping that the fighters didn't come up and the flak wouldn't be too thick. Bombardier's job was, Ed's job as a pilot was to fly the airplane to the highest degree of skill that he had to get us to the target. The fighters, the gunner's jobs were with the, we had 10 50 caliber machine guns on B-24, and the gunner's job were when the fighters hit us was to keep the fighters off. And in flying a formation of 7 planes in a diamond formation, if you flew the formation correctly and stayed in tight, then in theory, you formed a ring of fire that the fighters couldn't get through. And so if everybody did their job just right, well, you had a pretty good defense against them. So then when you got to approaching the target, Bombardier's job was to get the Norden bomb sight on the target, get the crosshairs zeroed in as best he could, which was essential to do it. And then as you went over, then you dropped the bombs. That was the purpose of the mission, was to get your bombs on it. And we were very careful about that because we did not get credit for our mission unless we dropped our bombs on the primary target or a secondary target or a target of opportunity. Many times cloud cover would come in and you just couldn't see. Many times you get shot up before you got to the target, but we did our best to get the bombs down.
What's the target of opportunity?
There was always the primary target, like a marshalling yard in Vienna, or a secondary target, which could be a small refinery nearby. But if neither of those were available, within a target of opportunity would be anything that was moving that involved trucks or trains or any kind of military concentration. And so we, from time to time, would have a target of opportunity like that, which would be a munitions train moving through the mountains or something like that.
You said you went into the war 18, you came out 35. That's sort of how you expressed it.
Right.
And the college professors who talk about the war vets, they come out of the war and then they get the GI Bill and they use that money to go to college. And the old college profs say that this is the most motivated group of students that they ever had. Could you say for you in particular, how did you change? How did you went into the war one way, you came out a very different way? Could you, put that into words? How did the war change you?
Well, I guess it would be, to put it in as simple terms as possible, I realized how fortunate I was to be alive. And so the more important things I took on greater importance for me, and the lesser things of not that high degree of importance went farther down. So I guess I had a greater emphasis on the things that were important parts of life.
What would some of those things be?
Family, friends, country, unlimited blessings we have as Americans. Just think about it. We're one of the few countries in the world that has a dependent sanitary water supply. Most people in the world don't even have a clean drink of water, don't have a bar of soap, don't have an organized police force. We have all those things, and when you've been without them for a good long while, well, then I think we all tend to appreciate them a lot more. So, I have learned to, Lord willing, I will never, ever take any blessings for granted, ever again.
You said just now that you learned, or one of the things, that you were glad to be alive, and so that's what caused you to become more serious. Of the 50 missions that you flew, just guessing, how many of those did it seem in the course of that mission that you may not make it back? I mean, how many of them were either your plane had taken that many hits, or how many would you guess out of 50 when the thought went through your mind, we may not make it back this time?
We were fortunate in that we did have some what we referred to as milk runs, which meant that we did not encounter any flak or fighters, but they were a lesser number of the total. But I'd say that, just thinking about it, I'd say that at least a dozen of the missions that I flew, it was really touch and go as to whether we'd get back or not. Of the 50, I'd say that a dozen.
Okay, so here's something I want to ask both of you. And we'll go to Mr. Adams first and then Mr. Drake. It's the same question. Let's go, if you can remember, maybe of those 12, maybe the one that comes to mind where it's, the one that's the most desperate situation. You do make it back, but you don't know you're going to make it back. What sort of things are going through your mind when you know you've got an hour or two to go to get back to your base, but your plane is iffy? What do you do with that time? Because your job as a bombardier doesn't come in handy right there. And then the same question to Mr. Drake would be, your crew's talking about bailing out, but the one fellow says, no, we're going to stick with the plane. And you've got a long way back before you finally get that plane on the ground. And during that time, I guess for you, for the pilot, you're more focused. But for you, you wouldn't have that same thing to focus on. But what sort of things do go through your mind? Even as you're controlling the plane, you must have other thoughts going through your mind. Or maybe not. We'll go to Mr. Adams first, then I'll come to Mr. Drake.
Well, it was obviously first mission that was the most difficult was the third mission that I flew up to Pluttertal in Blackheimer, Germany, and the fighters and the flak were just swarming all over us all the time. And our tail gunner, who was just 18 years old while we were in Italy, got 3 confirmed kills that day. The German fighters lined up on their back end. Of course, we were flying tail end Charlie. When you first get to join your outfit, you always fly tail end Charlie, which is the very back position in the formation, in the squadron formation. And so you're the most vulnerable. So the fighters were coming in, and they'd line up on one side, and he'd move his turret over that way, and then the others would come in a little bit closer from the other side, back and forth. But fortunately, he got 3 confirmed kills that day, we did. And some of the other planes in the squadron did not get back, but some of them also got some kills there. So in the midst of all of that, it's kind of hard to diagram your mind other than just hoping that everything would work out all right and that we could get back. And I think that being our age, first encounter like that, we were just pretty well stunned at the intensity of something, because nobody had ever tried to kill me before in my life. And it was just, I can't believe that they're actually shooting at us, trying to kill us, Surely this is not the way it's going to be from now on. But sure enough, it was like that. So that's a poor answer, Preston, but under extreme pressure. Then as each succeeding mission went by and those events occurred again, just say, Lord, get us through another one, please.
Mr. Drake, do you remember, you're obviously trying to control the plane and get it down someplace safe, but do you have other thoughts in the back of your mind? Like even images that are in your mind?
Well, you pinpointed the main theme, and that was the responsibility to fly that aircraft. You sure couldn't put it on automatic pilot when it was damaged, and also when you were trying to stay in tight formation, if that was the case, or if you were had been damaged, dropped out of formation or something like that. So the pilot and the co-pilot were really just they were just going hard at it the whole time. There wasn't any time to really kind of think about what was going to happen. At that age, and at your age, perhaps, I never thought that I would be killed. I thought there'd be other guys shot down. I thought others would lose their lives. But it never occurred to me that could possibly happen to me. Unfortunately, it didn't. But I think that might be the mindset of that age group, 19, 20, 21. I feel that was the way with our age group, and I think perhaps it might be the same way with you. You might be tempted on occasion in another context. Automobile challenge, some risky challenge at the swimming pool or the lake or something like that. And there's a tendency at that age, was for me, maybe it would be for you, to take unnecessary risks. And it takes some discipline on the part of a young man or a young woman to say, no, I'll not do that. That doesn't make sense. ever want to think I'm going to do it just to prove a point, show how cool I am, or something of that nature. It's just
Let me ask-
always behoove you.
Let me ask another question, and then we'll go back to Mr. Adams. And that is, a few minutes ago, Mr. Adams said that he had respect for the Germans. He thought they did a good job. They were good at what they did, and they were young kids like he was, just serving their country. No sense of animosity, personal animosity toward them at all. Did you feel the same way?
Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, after the war, another friend of mine, fraternity for Lebanon, came up with the idea of trying to bring the sons and daughters of former enemy nationals to American universities. And we brought the first one. I think there were hundreds, maybe 2,000 or 3,000, that ultimately came to American colleges and universities in the years after the war. And we brought a young man from Berlin, named Werner Janssen. I just felt as close a kinship with Werner as I could with his brother. I had no animosity towards the Germans, before or after.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around that, because they're trying to kill you, but you don't feel any personal animosity towards them.
I don't
Can you
really
explain
think,
that?
I really don't think they had any personal animosity towards us. They had a job to do to try to shoot the plane down out of the air, and we had a job to do, and we were acting on behalf of our nation. They were doing the same thing. I don't know that there was a personal feeling, at least on the part of most of the men I knew and worked with.
Mr. Adams, did you make any distinctions in your mind, or do you remember ever having any conversations with the guys in your crew, sort of distinguishing between the average German down there who's just doing his job and the Nazi who's a hardcore disciple of Hitler? Did you make those kinds of distinctions in the war?
Yes, we did. I certainly did, and most of the guys on my crew did exactly the same. And you know, these German fighter pilots were very skilled, and they'd come weaving through the formation so close sometimes that you could see their faces, literally, as they could see us. Of course, everybody had on oxygen masks and everything, but the eyes were, you could certainly see those. And you know, dropping bombs from 25 to 30,000 feet and shooting at some plane in and out just like that, it's vastly different from hand-to-hand combat, which many of our special forces are doing right now over in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and what occurred with ground troops and Marines in the Pacific and so forth. So it was different. Impersonal is not the proper word to use, but you were more or less detached, so to speak. You had a target that was 5 miles below you that you were dropping bombs on, and unless you had to actually see the results of those, which you didn't, because we were flying back to Italy after having dropped their bombs up in Germany. So I never felt that rage that I'm sure that these special forces guys do today, who are over and see what some of these enemy people have done to little children and to women and defenseless elderly people. Then I can think that I would certainly have a sense of rage if I were encountering somebody like that, but ours was pretty much detached.
Let's go. I want to ask Mr. Stroud that question, because you hear very different things. This is very common. I hear this from World War II vets who fought in Europe. A lot of them will make distinctions between, say, the SS, you know, the hardcore Nazi fanatics, and then your average German soldier. Whereas in the Pacific, there's a lot more of this personal animosity. And since you served in the Pacific, you were at Okinawa, what accounts for, in your mind, the difference between this experience in the Atlantic, which this is common, I hear this frequently, but what I commonly hear from veterans in the Pacific War was that there was a strong sense of animosity against the Japanese there. What accounts for the difference?
I'm guessing, number one, the way our POWs were treated. Also,
Well, could you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
they were mistreated. When we were captured by the Japanese, there was great mistreatment of our troops.
Or could you give us an example? What would be an example?
Well, I don't even know how to answer the question because there are all kinds of examples. Starvation, beheading, whipping, no concern about an American being a person. Japanese figured that if an American soldier were captured, that he didn't deserve to be treated like a human, because that was their idea. To defend them, that's pretty well the way their younger troops were treated. They were beaten and they were mistreated, maltreated. The Japanese were so unpredictable, and they did not want to surrender, so they were tricky and always full of surprises. So there's a different attitude, I think, between the Japanese and the Germans. Now, as far as animosity is concerned, I was in the Pacific, but I have no animosity toward the Japanese now. In fact, we have some. My wife played in the Dallas Symphony for years, and there are quite a few Japanese musicians. They're great people. They're wonderful people. And the interesting thing is they know very little about World War II. I don't know why, but they don't know. But there's no animosity there. But I think that also the Japanese mistreatment of the Chinese prior to our entering the war is something that we knew about. Therefore, we expected tricks and unpredictable actions from them.
Anybody out here want to ask a question? Yeah, go, Josh.
So the numbers of aircraft in a very short period of time. They needed all of them.
Do you remember hearing in the news, on the radio, in the newspapers, reading in the newspapers about this guy in Germany who was building and apparently getting ready for it? Do you remember that being in the air, sort of as news?
Well, for me, it was sort of a detached knowledge.
You just hear things.
Yeah, I saw something in the newspaper, but I was more interested in what's going on campus or at home or something like that. But certainly we're aware of Hitler and time to time increasingly aware of the atrocities that were occurring over there. Did you have a different...
I think you pretty well expressed it, Ed. I just add this, that we were younger than you all are, and we did not have television, of course, and didn't have instant communication, and you'd have the newspaper and the radio with limited information. And being a high school student or a freshman in college, as Ed said, pretty detached, and just really did not even comprehend what the total horror situation was in Germany and what the Japanese were doing to the Chinese at that time. And we, after all, we were in America, and we were protected, and they weren't going to do that to us.
Well, so then can you talk about December 7, 41? Because all of a sudden, now of course Pearl Harbor's way out there too, but it's part of the U.S. Do you remember, can you tell us where you were when you heard the news? Do you remember?
I surely do. I remember it as clearly as if it were yesterday. I was standing out behind the fraternity house and listening to a car radio. One of the guys had a car that had a radio in it. He was listening to the car radio and heard what was going on and the events of December 7th. And the discussion was, where do we go from here? What do we do now? And I think all three of us went to Dallas the next day and volunteered for something. Let me ask, this is just an aside. How many of you know what a B-17 looks like? Have ever seen a B-17? I see a few hands. Well, I'm going to take the liberty to show a picture of B-17 to the numbers of you who did not indicate something in there what a B-17 looks like. I brought these props just to that would be, and got south of Brussels, and that was really an event for that community. All the school children came out to play. We were the entertainment. So, and there's another picture of the aircraft after it comes to rest. So anyway, I show those. I told Quincy, I thought I'd bring some props just to fill in the gaps in our presentation.
I had just returned from church, and we were sitting down in our den and had the radio on, and that's when we first heard about Pearl Harbor. And my dad, who was a World War I veteran, looked at me and he said, "Well, son, it won't be long till you'll be involved in it." And his prediction was exactly correct. So December the 7th, 1941 changed everything for America. We were then at war, and we had been attacked. Americans had been killed without any warning. And so the whole complexion changed dramatically, and volunteering was the thing to do.
Do you have any recollection, either of you have any recollection of news about the U.S. Navy? You know, that shooting had actually already started in the Atlantic between the U.S. and Germany, the German submarines and the U.S. Navy. The U.S. was assisting the Allies, sending over material and supplies and so on. Was that big news? That, I mean, the shooting had started in the Pacific, but
the U-boat attacks in the North Atlantic were not really, didn't penetrate. I don't remember much about it.
Blackout, news blackout. We didn't know.
And Pearl Harbor comes as a complete surprise.
Absolutely. I'll try and answer first. We thought that eventually we would get the Germans whipped down so much that they'd have to surrender, but we didn't know when that was going to be. And of course, just not knowing when and just keeping going, you sometimes wondered, you know, how much longer is this going to last? When am I going to get to go home? Will I live through it? Those kinds of things.
I had pretty much the same thoughts, I think.
Well, that brings up the question of German resistance. And Mr. Drift, you said that you flew missions into May 1945, which is the end of the war in Europe.
Yes.
Was German resistance still substantial at that point with the flag going up? Or?
Every target that we went to until the very last mission, every target was heavily defended with anti-aircraft. And as Quincy said, you get that target, it looked like you were just flying into a metallic wall and throw it up.
So even in the last months of the war, still a lot of flags.
Oh, yes. They, I don't know where they got the sources or the weaponry or the munitions, but they had it. And, they used it. To me, it seems so different. In World War II, I had the perception that all of America was behind us, and for us, and supported us. And we were so enthusiastic. Our patriotism level was so high that it all seemed so right. And the Iraq conflict, of course, is in the minds of many Americans a big question mark whether or not we ought to be there. And I feel sorry for our troops who are sensitive to the fact that a great number of Americans really are not supportive of their efforts and their risks of their lives. So that's a significant difference.
Mr. Adams, did you want to respond to that?
I think Ed said it pretty well. I'll just add this, that all of our troops are volunteers now in Iraq, and Afghanistan. And when you're in a uniform, you do what you're told to do and go where you're told to go to. And the worst thing in the world can happen to someone in uniform is for to feel like his own countrymen are not supporting what he's doing. But it's totally different. World War II, the whole nation was behind it. There was no question. And in a little town like I grew up in, if you were a male, of proper age, and did not have a physical impairment, you should be in uniform, or the community looked at you out of the corner of their eye.
I want to add a postscript on that. I was so excited to be commissioned to get those silver wings in May of 1944. I want to just, as an addendum, say that those silver wings did wonders for my social life.
Question over here, get a quick question from Rob, and then we'll try to go to Billy, and then, I know we're running out. Go ahead, Rob.
Some World War II veterans are kind of reluctant to tell their stories. Why do you travel all the way from Dallas to educate us, and do you think it's important for the younger generations to hear your stories?
I'm delighted for the interest for more than half a century. World War II was almost a forgotten event in American life. And just in recent years, I think with the publication of some of the Stephen Ambrose books, all of a sudden there's been a tremendous renewed interest in World War II. And I'm delighted for that. I think that was such a big thing in the lives of so many Americans that it's wonderful that we have an opportunity to share some of the details of that conflict. So excuse me.
But may I add what Ed said? Layden Stroud is a trustee of John Brown University, so I've heard a lot about your school for a long time, and I feel honored to be invited to come and talk about World War II. And as Ed said, today it's estimated that World War II guys are dying at the rate of 1,300, 1,500 per day. And so as each year goes by, that number will increase on the daily demise of us. And so I think that I feel honored that you all have the degree of interest that you do in hearing about something that happened 60 years ago. And I would hope that it might add some measure of kind of a little verbal hands-on in some of the things that you may be hearing about World War II.
Amen for that.
There are several questions, but we just have time for this last one. And this is the most important question, so I want the crowd to stick with it, especially on Veterans Day. And I asked the question because it's a way of honoring those who didn't come back. And I just want to ask each of you if you could tell us the name and the age, and tell us a bit about someone you know who went to the war but didn't come back. And we can maybe we'll start with Mr. Adams and then Mr. Drake.
There was a navigator on another crew in my squadron named Rabinowitz. He was a red-headed guy from Milwaukee. He and his crew had been there flying missions a good while before we got there. He was one of the brightest guys that I'd ever known. He was a terrific card player, one of the best that I'd ever matched up with. And he and his crew were shot down just before they were ready to go home.
How old was
he? He was 20 years old.
My roommate at college the first year was a chap from Chicago named Bob Parkin. P-A-R-K-I-N, yes, Bob Parkin. And Bob's father was a general. He could have perhaps picked made his choice of any cushy assignment in the military that he wanted, but he chose to to join the Army, the ground forces, and he was in time in Europe. He was captured. He was POW for a period of time, and as the Allies approached where the prisoners of war were kept, they began to move them back closer to Berlin and that sort of thing. And in the winter of 1944-45, cold winter in Europe, they marched these POWs for miles and miles, and they had been ill-fed and ill-clothed at the time. And Bob was a healthy, he was a strapping 6-footer at 190 pounds, just a peach of good health. But that forced march was too much for him, and he died, dropped to the wayside on the march. And they just left his body there. I learned that from his mother. A friend who was with him wrote his mother in Chicago what had happened to her son. And she, in turn, a short time later, wrote me and told me the circumstances of Bob's death.
How old was he?
I would say 19, maybe 20, not more than 20.
And Mr. Stroud, someone come to mind that you want to remember today?
Yes, always my best friend in high school. He was a bombardier navigator, and I heard through his family, of course, that he crash landed in France. We were very close.
What was his name?
Larry Wolf.
And how old was he?
20? Could have been more than that.
Well, I think we should thank these guys for coming.